Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell Matthews here, and today we're going to cover a story that I think you might find pretty interesting. Apparently, the government's giving $200 million to one casino operator to open up some casinos. This has caused a huge clash between Liberals and Conservatives in the House of Commons. This story caught my attention when I saw a member of Parliament posted a section of the House of Commons meeting on his YouTube channel. This MP is named Pierre Poilievre. If you haven't heard of him before, he's the head finance critic for the Conservative Party. There was actually talk in the past of him running to become the new Conservative leader sometime in the future. So you might want to keep an eye on this guy because you never know, he might end up being your prime minister one day. He was pretty pissed off that the Liberals had given $200 million to a company called Gateway Casinos. This casino operator has casinos in British Columbia, Alberta, and in Ontario. Before we get any further into the story, let's take a look at Pierre Poilievre's YouTube video and see what he had to say today. We'll stop along the way to talk a little bit more in depth about exactly what they're saying.
Who would bet their own money on Gateway Casinos? Well, it turns out nobody. Of course, the company was just downgraded to junk status, and its parent company lost 95% of its value on the stock market before being delisted altogether. In fact, financial experts in Toronto say the company vastly overvalues its assets.
What experts?
But there's someone who would invest other people's money in it. The casino just got the jackpot of $200 million from this government. With the financial genius over there who invested $200 million of our tax dollars in this failing casino firm, please stand up.
People laughing. Okay. Wow. I always find it so funny when I see this kind of like laughter and clapping in the House of Commons. It reminds me of the political equivalent of that meme where the dude like leans back and is like, oh, everyone's freaking out around him.
Pow.
Poilievre's main point was that the company wasn't doing too well and that it didn't make any sense to give money to this company when nobody else would invest in it except for the Canadian government. And then he goes on to say that financial experts in Toronto say that the company overvalues its assets. Basically means that they just think they're worth more than they actually are. I'd love to know exactly what experts these are because just him saying this doesn't really prove to me that people are actually saying this and that it's backed up in fact, but I'm not saying it's not, I just would love to see the sources. And then he goes on to say that the Prime Minister is basically just spending Canadians' money. That's true because anytime a government spends money, it's essentially coming from the taxes that you and I pay.
While the Conservatives play silly political games, we recognize the extraordinary situation the Canadians are facing. We're a few days away from Thanksgiving, and people are worried about whether or not they're going to see their loved ones, how they're going to make it through this pandemic, whether or not we're going to be able to gather for Christmas. And as a country and as a government, we remain focused on that. We're working with partners across the country, with premiers and provinces and territories, and continue to work with all orders of government as we deliver for Canadians through this pandemic. Let the Conservatives play games. We're focused on Canadians.
Okay, that's a point. That's a kind of interesting way to respond to that question, I think. Justin Trudeau's basically saying, hey, we have other things to focus on. We need to focus on getting money to Canadians, which is the topic of a lot of my videos. We need to worry about Canadians being able to spend time with their families at Thanksgiving. He's sort of listing all these things that they're saying, hey, we should focus on this instead of what you're talking about. Regardless of which party you support, and even if you don't support a party at all, that's a pretty frustrating way to have a question answered. I mean, he didn't even really say anything about the casino at all. That being said, the $200 million spent on reopening these casinos is kind of like a drop in the bucket compared to all the other money that's being spent right now. So I can see why they're saying like, hey, why are you honing in on this one little detail? I got curious and did a little bit of digging to see why they got this money and if there was a program surrounding it, just to have an idea on like how this money was doled out. I came across this news website that's basically news catered only for casinos. The headline was Gateway Casinos bags $200 million Canadian for Operation Kickstart. The first interesting thing I noticed is that it says here that the money is just a loan. It's not actually just handed out. It also says that the money comes from the Large Employer Emergency Financial Facility. This is a program that was introduced in May so that the government could support these larger corporations. The idea is if they give money to these larger corporations, then they'll be able to rehire people and people will have jobs again. But nobody has been able to get any of this money yet except for this casino company called Gateway Casinos. Even though other big companies have voiced the fact that, like, hey, we could use some money to reopen our businesses, they haven't got it. The article says that the loan's going to be used for rehiring its 8,000 casino staff members that had been laid off earlier in the year. And this is across 26 casino venues. Okay, that's 8,000 people that are back to work that wouldn't have otherwise been working. That makes me curious about how much money 8,000 people getting the full amount of the CRB would actually be. The maximum amount you can get from the CRB is around $11,700 if I remember correctly. We're going to multiply that by 8,000. Okay, that's $93,600,000. That's a pretty big number considering the money that was lent was $200 million even, and it sounds like it's just a loan too. Now, I'm not saying all these people would be collecting CRB money if they weren't working at the casino, but I'm just saying it's something that you need to think about when you consider these numbers and how much good is coming from this money that's being put into an industry. I'm kind of confused about what this money actually is. The Conservatives are kind of making it sound like it was just $200 million given away because they're saying, hey, this is taxpayer money that you're spending. Whereas this casino news article says that it's only a loan. That is a big difference in my mind, and it's something that definitely needs clarifying. If it's a loan, it's likely that there's interest on it, which means that the Canadian government could be getting that money back and then some. But if the Liberals are just giving away that money, that's a totally different story. Let's see what else Pierre Poilievre has to say about this.
Speaking of games, you've got to know when to hold them. Know when to fold them. Know when to walk.
Wait, is he seriously quoting Kenny Rogers right now? This is what goes on in the House of Commons? Oh, man.
Know when to hold them. Know when to fold them. Know when to walk away. And know when to swindle a naive prime minister of $20 to $200 million of other people's money. Because that's exactly what Gateway Casinos has just done. They can't get money from anyone. In fact, for 10 years, their owner tried to sell the company, but nobody would buy. Well, we have new job losses of 2,000 people in the energy sector out west, 500 out east, 1 million Canadians without paychecks since the pandemic. Why is he throwing away our money in this jackpot for casino insiders?
Those are some interesting points. Again, he's saying that the casino basically swindled the Canadian government out of $200 million. Again, it's a big difference if it's a loan or if it's actually money that's given away. Let's get to the bottom of what this program really is. Okay, so here's some more information. It basically says that the large employer emergency financing facility is basically acting as a bridge financing to large employers to cover operational needs. Bridge financing is used when a company or an individual needs money, but they can't get it from a traditional source like a bank or some other commercial lending institute. So instead, they get a bridge loan, which is something that's shorter term so that they have the ability to get their finances in check so that they can get a loan from a more traditional sense. This is familiar to me from working in the real estate industry because oftentimes when people are buying a new house but they needed to sell their old one first to pay for it, they need to get a bridge loan. If they couldn't get the two closing dates to line up and they need the money from selling their home to buy the new home, they'll get a bridge loan just to carry them over that amount of time until their first home sells to give them the money to pay for the second one. Oftentimes this bridge financing is at a more expensive interest rate. So people are incentivized to get out of that bridge financing as quickly as possible to get to better interest rates. Okay, and it also says that these loans will have interest rates depending on the type of loan you get. It's either negotiated or it's stated here 5 or 8%. So there is interest, which means if everything goes according to plan, the Canadian government should be getting back more than $200 million in the future. It also says, and I think this is pretty important, that they have to commit to minimizing job loss and sustaining domestic business activities. Now, I'm not sure how they're going to monitor this and how the company's going to report it, but it's saying, hey, you need to focus on keeping jobs in our country. It's basically to try to prevent them from using the money for something that wouldn't directly benefit Canadians. I don't know if I trust that the government has a proper way to monitor this and make sure it's actually happening, but the fact that it's in the terms of the loan makes me feel a little bit more comfortable that the money that we're loaning them is going to be used effectively to help Canadians. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of this money is going to be used and it's going to be super helpful for the company individually, and their main goal is to make profits. So I guess the idea is to help the business out and to also help Canadians at the same time. So don't get me wrong, it's not a totally altruistic thing like, hey, we're only going to help Canadians. They want to make money for themselves in the end. That just makes good economic sense. It also has this section which basically says that this isn't a bailout, and any money that's lent to a company, they have to follow these guidelines to ensure that it's not a bailout. Essentially, this section says that the company has to offer shares of its company for individuals in Canada to buy just on the stock market, so that if the business recovers because of this loan, Canadians can share in the upside. That's not a bad term to put in there. Okay, so we've determined that it's a loan. Clearly, there's all the guidelines there. It's a loan. We're not just giving them that money. That changes things in my eyes. I would definitely be on the side of the Conservative if we were just giving $200 million bailouts to companies left and right. But at least so far, it doesn't seem like that's what we're doing. I do agree, though, that we are getting ourselves into quite the deficit that I think that our kids and our kids' kids will be paying off down the road. The Conservatives are right that we need to keep a close eye on our spending just so that we don't screw ourselves for the future. I also agree with the Conservatives that are frustrated that saying like, hey, Justin Trudeau, you didn't really answer the question, you just kind of brushed it off. I think that was a pretty dumb move by the Prime Minister, because if he explained what I just explained to you, I think a lot more people would understand why they're not paying attention. But you know what? For all I know, he had just finished explaining that, and this video doesn't cover it. So who knows? But what do you think about the way the government's handling this kind of money? Instead of handing out these sort of loans, should they be loaning money to Canadians directly instead? Or does it make sense that these businesses get it so that we can have higher employment rates? Comment down below. Do you think it's better to have more employment or more funds in the hands of Canadians directly? I'm curious to hear what you think. And as always, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. I'm bringing new videos every day, sometimes twice a day, about what's going on in Canada right now. And for a lot of people who are paying attention to the CRB and to news about Canadian benefits, I've been bringing a lot of content on that. So if you're at all interested in those things, or personal finance, investing, real estate, that's what goes on here on this channel. Hit the subscribe button, and if you like the video, hit the like button too. But that's it for me this time, guys, so I'll see you next time.